Well, hello there, and welcome to the closet where I keep all of my spaghetti. My spaghetti closet contains about 100 feet of speaker cable, plus the power management from 8 amps, and a little bit of extra wiring from a patch bay and a few other things I've got in here. This is all part of my new amp storage system. Let me show you a little bit about how I threw this together and what the front end of it looks like. So the first step is, of course, going to be to tear everything apart and make the room that I need. I'm repurposing an older set of shelves that I got elsewhere, but these are the simplest shelves you could build. Mine have been cut down to about 6'4". I don't need a full 8-foot length. However, if you were building a shelf system that was 8 foot tall and 8 foot long, you could do this with very few cuts. This would be 8 foot 2x4s for the full span of each shelf, 8 foot 2x4s for each corner. In my case, mine are 2x6s because, again, I'm repurposing one that was built for something more heavy duty. And then 8 foot long by 2 foot deep shelves of plywood would mean that each sheet of plywood only needs to be cut into two foot deep lengths. Some lengths of 2x4 that are cut to fit between the front and back on each of these shelves, as well as pieces that are cut to be cleats to hold them in place. So you build your little ladder here with the top of these cleats being the bottom of where you want your large shelf to be, and then you just put them in place through it all together. Very simple. Unnecessarily heavy duty for what I'm doing today, but again, it's a repurpose, so free is for me. Let's reset where we have all these shelves. I'm actually going to use just 2x2 cleats this time because I just don't need full 2x4s. Almost forgot a very important part. We have felt feet that we're going to add to the bottoms of these so that I can slide it around when I have to go reconfigure the cabling. All right, step 2, a little bit of a fuck around and find out. We got to see how many of these larger speakers we can fit under this portion now that we've sized it for the biggest speaker we have. And then we need to see what speakers need to go on the next shelf so that we can do some relative dimensioning to figure out where shelf 2 goes. And then we'll rinse and repeat with shelf 2, full of amp heads. Shelf 3 is just going to be basically storage. All right, now we've got 3 shelves in place. This top shelf's going to give me a ton of room for like some Rubbermaid bins to stow odds and ends and drum hardware and like patch cables and all that sort of stuff that I've currently got scattered throughout the studio. And this little space over here, well, that's a secret tool that's going to help us later because I want to be able to turn this all on from one power source, and I want to be able to mix and match my amps and cabinets without having to reach in the back and mess around with the entire piece of furniture to move cables. So we're putting in a patch bay. Would you look at this idiot? He has no idea that he hasn't even turned his microphone on, and now it's going to be my problem to come back through and explain the patch bay to you while he sits there in his little clip, wiggling his piece of wood around. Most of the parts for this came from Amazon. The rails, they were 16-unit rails. It was less than 20 bucks for all of the hardware here. The patch bay I picked up secondhand from Guitar Center, $34 I believe it was. It's a Behringer PX1000. The power unit is a Pyle power unit from Amazon. Again, it was $90-something. And this thing's great because it's got 16 plugs in the back plus 4 in the front. Power conditioning with its own dedicated breaker. It's got the meter to tell me what the current voltage is. It's got a couple USB jacks as well so that I can plug in devices that run off of USB power. The mounting was simple enough. I just took a couple pieces of 2x4 that were left over from cutting down the shelf, and I put some pocket holes in. I put them in 19 inches apart so that the rails would sit where they need to. I mounted my patch bay and power conditioner to the rails before mounting the rails so that I would know exactly where they need to go together. Set them in about 2 inches from the front of the thing. Screwed it all together, and that's the patch bay done. Took all of about 10 minutes. Now for the biggest pain in the ass in the whole thing. I need to make enough speaker cables for all this bullshit. I soldered together a bunch of custom-sized speaker cables from a 100-foot roll of monster speaker cable, and a bunch of just 1/4-inch TS ends that I picked up off of Amazon. Much cheaper than buying several speaker cables if you're doing a project like this. I think the roll of cable was like $30, and I probably spent another 20 on the ends. I drilled 3-inch holes and the shelves just above and just below my patch bay so that I could route everything through the shelves instead of behind it. And now that I've got everything kind of routed where I want it to be, I took some time to bundle together these cables and zip tie them so that they'd be a little bit more manageable and a little bit less of a flying spaghetti monster. So now that I've got this all set up and these shelves all filled up with all of my amps, all of my cabs, I now have everything with a nice storage system that won't get knocked around by the cat. I've got extra storage up top for bins of various things like drum hardware, patch cables, boxes and manuals for equipment, all that sort of stuff. And I have everything centrally routed. So now, with everything plugged into the Pyle power supply, when I come into the studio, I can turn on all of my amps and pedal boards and everything from one switch. Now I have all of my amps connected to their own cabs through this patch bay, but now I can use the patch bay to mix and match amps without having to move amps around and figure out how to stretch the speaker cables across spans and all of that stuff. I can just move a patch cable and connect something to a different speaker set when I'm playing around with tones. This also allowed me to spend a lot of time reorganizing my studio. I got rid of a couple of pieces of furniture. It let me push these drums into the corner a little bit more so that I can rearrange the rest of the space and make a little bit more room. And that's really what I'm going for here, is to constantly be improving the workspace that I'm giving myself and creating a better studio each time I do a project. You could doll this up with a face frame, some molding, something like that if you're trying to give it a better presentation. Right now I'm going utilitarian. Once I get a few other repairs done in this room, like the ceiling that had fallen down, I will then probably fancy this up. Right now, 2x4 shelves is just fine. You can also get away with smaller material depending on what you're putting on it. I think the next project in here may very well be a rolling cart for my recording deck, but I got a couple other things to do before that. I've got to refinish a floor in my house. I've got to finish building a banjo, and I got a few other projects that you'll probably see before I get around to that moving cart. But for now, I'm going to play around with all of my big loud amps. Okay, bye.